Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, this week we have organized series of lectures on changing paradigm in society. In the first two lectures, we tried to understand changing paradigm in global perspective, and yesterday we talked about the changing paradigm in Indian society. We'll move further and we'll try to understand the contemporary society of India, and we'll see what challenges, problem, and prospects it's facing. And I will try to understand the different dimension of it. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio eminent scholar Dr. Anand Kumar. He is a social science thinker, great scholar, academician, and in fact he has started one kind of discussion analyzing the impact of liberalization and globalization on society and contributed a lot. So I think his knowledge and experience will give us an insight to understand this topic and will also guide us how to see the problem and how to find the prospect and solution of it. So I think on your behalf, I request him to start the lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amrenji. I feel honored and privileged to be invited before you to share some of my understanding of the present challenges and prospects before people and society and government of India. After 66 years of freedom and 63 years of parliamentary democracy, with a constitution which is envy of the world because of its pro-people and progressive character, we have covered a long distance since independence in terms of progress, prosperity, and democracy. But we have to go a long way before we can feel satisfied with the changes, as much of our country is still going through transition from poverty to a stable life with dignity. Many people still do not have sufficient resources for livelihood and to meet their basic needs. There are pockets which are yet to receive rays of freedom, justice, and democracy. There are new challenges also, where we see continuous deprivation and crisis of confidence about our present and our future. So friends, today we look at the major challenges before us in order to become a better society. There are many problems, but if you look at the major aspects of our needs as well as our promises with reference to the Indian national movement, dreams of freedom fighters, and the Constitution of India, you may agree with me that there are 6 major deficits which require our attention urgently. These deficits are development deficit, governance deficit, legitimacy deficit, democracy deficit, deficit in nation building, and last but not least important is the deficit in citizenship building. It will be anybody's concern if one is reporting that there are 6 major deficits in the making of our nation state, despite 66 years of freedom from foreign rule. The first deficit, which requires topmost priority, which has been recognized by the policy makers, including the Planning Commission of India and the United Nations development programs, is development deficit. India has become one of the 5 major economic engines of globalization and liberalization in the modern world system since the beginning of the century. But India is deeply divided in terms of developed part of India, where we have state-of-the-art technology, transport, communication, education, health, employment, living conditions, and developing India, which is trying to catch up with the requirements of life with security and happiness in terms of basic needs like drinking water, electricity, housing, health, nutrition, education, social security, and then left out India, excluded India, underdeveloped India, which is supposed to be part of poor India. Between these three, we have a huge deficit of development, and this has been addressed by our policymakers through programs like Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Program, which is there to make our urban centers, our towns and cities, improved places in terms of water, electricity, sanitation, roads, housing conditions. We also have certain programs to address the problem of infrastructure, particularly road communication and transportation, around the new opportunities of information and communication technology, and priority to road building to have all-weather roads to connect all villages to nearby towns, all towns with nearby metro centers, and all metro centers with each other through all-weather roads. We have also tried to connect the country more systematically through investment in railways, and of course there has been some impact of liberalization in opening the airways to public-private partnership, which has created new network of air facilities for transportation. But the development deficit is a major deficit which makes us stagnating at the bottom of international community. We are among the top 5 countries in terms of our growth and potential for liberalization and globalization, but we are also among the bottom quarter of the rest of the world, hovering around 145, 147 rank in a committee of 197 countries belonging to the United Nations Organization. China is far ahead of us, even Sri Lanka, and in some indicators Bangladesh is doing better, and this is no matter of feeling relaxed about our challenges of development. The second immediate challenge is improving governance. Governance deficit is influencing our commitment for democracy, rule of law, and fraternity with each other. It is promoting cleavages around caste, religion, classes, languages, regions. There is need to democratize our governance apparatus as soon as possible to make India a land of triple justice, political, social, and economic, a country with a strong urge of unity among the citizens, and a people who are progressive, secular, and socialist in their outlook. How do we do it? One major effort for improving the governance was through the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution, which empowers the basic layers of our local governance, meaning Panchayati Raj institutions and district and city councils. This brings democracy to the doorstep of citizens in terms of the needs of the day-to-day life. 73rd, 74th Amendment has also created a space for women to become part of political decision making through reservation of 30% spaces. This complements our effort to make our governance more and more participatory, as we already had 7.5% reservation for the scheduled tribes and 15% reservation for the scheduled castes. So with scheduled tribes, scheduled castes and women included, we will have a better chance of participatory democracy. There are also certain other methods and measures which have been created in response to the challenge of governance deficit. One of them, with great positive results, has been Citizens' Right to Information, RTI. This makes citizens undertake their role of vigilance and engagement for transparency and honesty and responsibility and accountability in our governance system. The crisis of governance is also related with problem of growing corruptibility and corruption through crony capitalism and dishonest and corruptible authority holders. There has been citizens' mobilization to become more involved and more concerned to make India a nation free of corruption. The dream of corruption-free India has excited the nation for last 2 years, and that's also a very important response which gives the hope that we can have some changes in very near future through cooperation of the legislature, judiciary, executive, media and civil society to respond to the problem of governance deficits. There is again a third deficit, which is legitimacy deficit. A critical minimum of legitimacy is required for effective governance. Effective governance is the basis for fulfillment of the dreams of development. But in last 20 years, often we were unable to create clear mandate for a single party rule at the center, and this creates compulsions of coalition governance with inherent problems of legitimacy deficit. The second problem, or the second root of legitimacy deficit in our society, has to do with increasing problems in our electoral practices and in our political party system. It is said that elections are getting polluted by the combined influence of 3 M's: money power, muscle power and media power, and this is isolating the masses from the election process. Secondly, it is also suggested that there is increasing infiltration of black money in financing of elections as well as our party system. The response has been in the form of a series of political reform committees, starting from Justice V.M. Tarkunde Committee to Shri Indrajit Gupta Committee and Dinesh Goswami Committee, as well as a number of recommendations, very significant recommendations of several chief election commissioners in last 15-20 years, which are in need of our attention as a nation. Unless we have electoral reforms, political reforms and a better system of governance, the problem of legitimacy is going to grow, because we are living in an age of globalization and our legitimation process is also getting subjected to influences of global forces, particularly global corporations. They are taking interest in our election process. They are influencing our party system. They are also influencing our parliamentary system. And this all makes us aware of the need to create better system of legitimacy and to address the problem of legitimacy deficit. A fourth problem of our present day deficits or challenges is democracy deficit. Democracy is not only a system of governance, is also a way of life. And the principles of democracy suggest freedom of opinion, unity of action, level of tolerance to provide space and scope for those who do not agree with the majority to live in security and confidence, and also continuity of discussions and debates and dialogues. Are we sure that we are permitting enough space and scope for debate and dialogue in our country today? Look at the media. There is growing pressure of advertisers, and there is this paid news syndrome in the media system. And that is one basic reason for democracy deficit. Look at the parliament. The government is not having enough patience to provide space and opportunity for the opposition voices to be presented on the floor of parliament or assembly. The number of active days is going down with passage of time in the assemblies and parliaments. In many places, in many provinces particularly, major bills and the budget are passed in a matter of minutes. This is not a happy growth of democracy. Then we do not have enough respect for the lower levels of democracy, meaning the people elected at the level of panchayats and districts are ignored by the higher levels. Panchayati elections are not taking place in time in some of the major provinces of India unless Supreme Court makes an intervention. Even if they are taking place, there is huge role of money power. Of course, caste, religion and gender biases are playing their own role. Finally, democracy is cultivated through a multi-party system. But look at the party system today. Most of the parties are reducing spaces for inner democracy. There is increasing tendency of a single leader-based party. The idea of collective leadership, the idea of internal debates, the idea of power to the workers is all becoming discounted. Even political leaders are not shy of creating successors from their own family, which is called nepotism. So lack of respect for parliament, lack of respect for different voices, lack of respect for the lower levels of representation, and of course lack of respect for traditions of democracy within media and political parties are major challenges for Indian democracy. Indian democracy must move towards federalization and decentralization for participation of the voters, participation of the workers, voters in the choice making and workers in party building. It seems that our political class is becoming more and more disconnected with the larger requirements of democratic mobilization and democracy building. At the same time, it is interesting that India is witnessing flowering of civil society, meaning voluntary bodies which are emerging without much interest in power politics for correcting the deviations in democracy of India. And this civil society evolution, civil society expansion and civil society engagement and intervention is a big zone of hope for tomorrow's democracy in India. The next major challenge has nothing to do with government, with market, with our traditions, with globalization. It has to do with us as the people of India, and this is deficit of nation building. The idea of Indian nation has become taken for granted. We have become more and more concerned about identity politics, where the identity is defined within the larger frame of Indian identity, but with less and less commitment for Indian identity and more investment, interest, mobilization and demand about less than national identity, meaning caste identity, community identity, ethnic identity, regional identity and many other identities. This has promoted identity politics. Identity politics is an important dividend of democracy, but it is to promote evolution, emergence of submerged identities which were decimated, destroyed, and degenerated during the colonial rule. But in the name of identity politics, if we promote separatism, it is dangerous for nation building. At the same time, there are reasons for people to feel alienated. Ethnic reasons, political reasons, economic reasons, socio-cultural reasons, historical reasons. The process of nation building demands a mechanism to translate these frustrations, these disappointments, these disenchantments into positive energy for nation building through dialogue, through accommodation, through new institutions, through new initiatives. It is suggested that India has arrived at a point in time where we need a second States Reorganization Commission to address the problem of internal colonization in certain large provinces of our country, which is creating a serious challenge to the process of nation building. So if we have a little open-minded approach to the demands of provincial space, political reorganization, then from Telangana to Gorkhaland, and from Jammu, Ladakh to Mithila and Vidarbha, we will have a new hope of togetherness in near future. Similarly, in our education system, we are promoting a competitive education for the children, where there is less and less emphasis upon cooperation. This cooperation is the basis for we feeling. This we feeling is the essential requirement for nation building. We are getting disturbed to notice that many of our children who are getting properly educated are becoming less and less committed to the idea of India. For them, it is related with their future career. Wherever they get better salaries, they will like to go, be it Bangalore, be it Berlin or Washington. Now, this is something where we have to sit up and think before we allow this slide, this degeneration, this benign neglect of the challenge of nation building. We can do it through togetherness or partnership between education system, media, economic system, political system, and socio-cultural orientation building processes for our younger generation. If India is not committed for deepening the process of nation building, India will face many challenges for continuing to grow together as a nation state. The last and most significant challenge for all of us who are a bit educated, a bit knowledgeable, is the problem of deficit of citizenship building. Citizenship building in the world has been achieved primarily through a very useful togetherness of education, economic process, particularly market, and political processes, particularly statecraft. Unfortunately, India has taken a very long time to provide right to education to all the children. So there has been limited role of education in nation building. Fortunately, we have compensated for this defect by having deep bonds with the traditions created by our Indian national movement for freedom from foreign rule. Even today, the heroes of the freedom struggle are found to be respected by younger generation. You go anywhere, in any college or school, you'll find the portraits of Gandhi, Subhash, Tagore, Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and many others. But at the same time, the market forces are not creating enough conduciveness to promote our togetherness as economic citizens. Jobless growth has been a prime feature of our new model of development for last few years. If you are a political citizen but without much economic role, how will you feel? You will feel as a second-rate citizens. So, processes like Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act are going to contribute to citizenship building in many ways, in harmony with the right to education, which has been accepted as a new right for all children without any difference and distinction of caste, class, gender, religion, region, age. Similarly, the citizenship building challenge is also there in our governance system. If our state, particularly our legislative system, executive system, and judicial system, have more attention to the better of people, the elite, the dominant caste, the majority community, the metro citizens, then there will be a hierarchy and a sense of injustice, discrimination among the rural people, among the minorities, among the people with less income, among the people from socio-educationally backward communities. And this feeling will dilute the commitment of citizenship. Any society can build a better future only on the basis of active citizens. Active citizens are created by a sense of commitment for citizenship. This was the dream of our freedom fighters, that if we create a free society with basic rights for all citizens, and we are committed to economic, political, and social justice for all, we will be a nation of such people who will be first citizens and who will be basically committed for citizenship duties, and then only their other identities will become relevant in their day-to-day behavior. But when we go for elections, we see that many of us vote according to non-citizenship considerations like caste, religion, region, money power, etc. When we go and meet people who are in responsible positions as citizens of India, we find them using other considerations than rule of law in performing their duties, which is the other name of corruption. Similarly, we also see that when we have to perform our duties as citizens, to go and vote, to pay taxes, to follow the laws, we are always tempted to violate them, ignore them, or avoid them. This is not a healthy situation so far as we, the people of India, are concerned. There is need to have better attention, and the chances are better because now education is going to be provided to all children between the age of 6 and 14 years in all parts of the country. And if we have a better level of education and information, we certainly will have more enlightened citizenship-based society in our country. So friends, let me conclude before I invite you for your questions, that today India is challenged by 6 major deficits in its commitment for a better tomorrow. The first challenge is uneven development, creating Bimaru India and Progressive India. And this split is causing a lot of problems in our quest for a model of harmony. We need path of sustainable development, and that's where we have to change ourselves in terms of our priorities, our initiatives and projects in the near future. The second problem is governance deficit, which is causing loss of togetherness, problem of implementing laws and creating a just society, governance deficit cannot be tolerated in a society which is already a victim of poverty and inequalities. In fact, poverty and democracy can go together for some time, but poverty, corruption and democracy cannot go together for a very long time. We do have certain initiatives like right to information, mobilization of citizens against corruption, decentralizations through 73rd and 74th Amendment, but we have to do more in much less time to address the problem of governance deficit. The third deficit, which is caused by development deficit and governance deficit, is legitimacy deficit, is a huge challenge which has to be addressed by immediately undertaking political reforms, particularly electoral reforms and reform in our party system and in our governance system. Fourth deficit has to do with democracy itself. Democracy in India is part of our larger consensus for a future which is based upon political equality, economic justice and social harmony. But democracy is not being cultivated sufficiently. The roots are still very shallow, and in certain ways we need to have democracy right from parliament to the family system. And it is interesting that media is monitoring problems of democracy, civil society is getting concerned about challenges of democracy, and of course political workers are also getting more and more anxious to do something to make our democracy better. Then of course the fifth deficit has to do with nation building. Unless we grow together, we feeling, which is the essential requirement of the spirit of nation, nationalism in an environment of ethnicity, regionalism, casteism, communalism and globalization is difficult to maintain. The idea of nation building is directly correlated with the idea of justice, idea of togetherness, idea of priority to the commitments as a citizen of a nation rather than other considerations. And I think there are movements now which are resisting identity politics, vote bank politics, and are asking for promoting politics of nation building. The final deficit, which is the most grave deficit, is citizenship building deficit. As we have a deficient education system so far, and as education is a major process of creating citizenship values among the people, particularly the younger ones, we have been really lagging behind in a comprehensive process of citizenship building. The idea of citizenship is also diluted or challenged by primordial loyalties like caste, language, religion, region. Today, India needs the engagement of education, economy and polity to protect and promote citizenship building for a better tomorrow. Now let's look at some of your questions to make this engagement complete. Thank you.
Okay, you well explained the different challenges the country facing, as contemporary society facing. But when we go historical, see the things in historical perspective, we find that the society was taking corrective measures in different phases of time. But in present situation, we find the society not taking corrective measure itself. So in this case, who should be held responsible and where the initiative should start? Because the blame game is more nowadays.
Your observation is very appropriate. In the colonial era, we knew that we are being governed by a foreign elite or foreign community. So there were a lot of initiatives by citizens and groups of citizens, and they were supported by larger society of enlightened people. Today we have become more and more state-centric, and we expect state to do most of the things which are otherwise the responsibility of the society. So I think we have to catch up, and there are some positive indicators. For example, Women's Movement of India is doing a few very outstanding contributions to make the condition of women more human, more dignified.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We have a caller from West Bengal, so let us take question first. Good afternoon, friends. Please ask your question.
गुड आफ्टरनून सर।
Okay, ask your
आज
question.
शिक्षक दिवस के अवसर पे मैं आप दोनों को प्रणाम करता हूं जी। और मेरा ये सवाल है कि जो फूड सिक्योरिटी बिल पास होने वाला है, क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा उसका?
Okay.
जो नया कानून आ रहा है, ये कुछ मायने में पहले से कुछ राज्यों में लागू है, जिसमें सार्वजनिक वितरण प्रणाली के जरिए निर्धनता से पीड़ित परिवारों को 35 किलो अनाज सस्ते दर पर मिलता है। अब यही कानून 67% आबादी को लाभ पहुंचाने के लिए बन रहा है। इससे जो हमारे परिवारों में कम आमदनी वाले हिस्से हैं, उनको अपने बच्चों, गर्भवती माताओं, बुजुर्गों और स्वयं को पर्याप्त आहार की गारंटी हो रही है, जहां गरीबी के कारण कोई कुपोषण का शिकार नहीं होगा, भूखमरी का शिकार नहीं होगा। इसलिए यह बहुत स्वागत योग्य प्रयास है।
इसको ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं, जहाँ पहले सोसाइटी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लेता था, एवरीवन शुड बी फीडेड, अब स्टेट ले रही है।
बिल्कुल, पहले गांव के अंदर ये माहौल था जहां पर कि अगर कहीं भूख है तो बाकी मिलके उसके लिए 4 रोटी का इंतजाम करते थे। अब राज्य सत्ता की जिम्मेदारी हो रही है कि जो निर्धनता से पीड़ित, अभाव से पीड़ित परिवार हैं, उनके दरवाजे तक अनाज पहुंचे।
तो इसमें जो हम डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन का प्रोसेस व्हेन वी स्टार्टेड, डोंट वी सी कंट्राडिक्टरी डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन?
कुछ बातें ऐसी जरूर हैं जहां पर कि गांव में पंचायती राज के जरिए इसको करना शायद ज़्यादा व्यावहारिक होता, लेकिन चूंकि पंचायती राज व्यवस्था गतिमान होने में असफल हो रही है, आर्थिक मामलों में वहाँ पर भी भ्रष्टाचार की शिकायतें आ रही हैं, अभावग्रस्त इलाकों में पंचायत अनाज का इंतजाम खुद नहीं कर सकती, इसलिए केंद्र से राज्य सरकारों के माध्यम से ये काम होना शायद एक जरूरी पहल हो चुकी है।
Initiative is good, not come on this issue only, but talking about other issues. Initiatives are good; they are taken with full vigor and enthusiasm. But when we analyze the impact and outcome over the years, we find that they are lacking the what was the impact intended at the time of initiating it.
You are very right. That's why we have discussed the problem of governance deficit. Generally, it is suggested that the programs are by and large well formulated, but then the delivery mechanism, the gap between the intentions and actual action is very glaringly dissatisfying. This was suggested by a former Prime Minister Shri Rajiv Gandhi by using this figure, imagined figure of the fact that if you start with 100 rupees, only 15 rupees reaches the beneficiary, and 85% of the allotted resources are lost in transmission. This is corruption, this is delivery deficit, and this is governance deficit.
So, what solution do you think? Because so far we have discussed.
I think there has to be both accountability and participation. Accountability of various levels of authorities for performing their duties, and if they don't perform their duties, there has to be a suitable reward and punishment system. And participation. Ordinary people, citizens like you and me, have to be actively engaged so that their presence makes the system a little more energized. If I am a Panchayat Pradhan, if I am a member of assembly, if I am an intelligent citizen, in all these roles we can be participating in improving the situation. At the moment there is some kind of withdrawal syndrome. Ordinary citizens do not feel encouraged or do not feel responsible for involvement in the affairs of society. Actually, many of us even don't go to vote. And that makes the system quite bureaucrat dependent, middleman dependent. And then they become fairly careless to fulfill their duties. Look at some of these schemes which are there in the name of health, midday meal, and many other facilities. Most of them have become victim of corruption between politicians and bureaucrats. It is very unfortunate.
Okay, so you enumerated these 6 deficit. So where to start first? How
I
to
think we have to
prioritize?
start from citizenship building, because when citizens are there, they become the watchdog. they become the eyes and ears of the society. If citizens are passive, if they do not come together on a voluntary basis for nation building, then the other four challenges, democracy, legitimacy, governance and development, they are byproduct of the larger dream of nation building.
Okay.
The idea of nation building will be dependent upon the level of citizenship building.
So how do you explain the present citizenship generations, whether they are active, passive, yeah, who could be the role model to
I think
to mobilize them?
you have asked a real question. We have different levels of citizenship concerns and consciousness among our society. First of all, we see that literate people and illiterate people can be broadly divided into two categories. The illiterate people, which is 35% of the population today, feels rather incompetent to deal with the citizenship roles, because they have to deal with bureaucracy, with business people, with power elite, and they feel rather nervous with lack of confidence. Among the educated people, then you have women who feel marginalized, less of a citizen, because of the gender discrimination, passivity of our system about providing spaces for women for their role as citizens. Then there is a great divide between rural and urban. It seems that the metro middle class is the most vocal part, which is asking for its rights and its claims from the state much more vocally than other sections. Other sections can become active through their interest group movements, like peasant movements of the past, that forced the country to look at our agricultural policies and the problems of rural India and do something better. So there was a peasant lobby in our parliament, peasant voice in our politics, peasant concern in our media. Today, peasants are feeling helpless. There is a story of high level of suicide in certain pockets of India among the peasants, but there is not much of solidarity either among the peasants or in the society for the peasants. Similarly, workers, industrial workers in organized sector, and the other nearly 90% workers in unorganized sector, both are facing declining capacity of resisting or mobilizing in the era of liberalization and globalization. Now, if workers are unable to put their act together, if peasants are voiceless, if rural people are marginalized, then you have a big challenge of creating spaces for citizenship roles. And this is where you need small, middle, and large level groups, their networks. There are some citizens who are very active. We can name them. There is one group around water issues led by people like Medha Patkar, Rajendra Singh, and others, Professor G.D. Agrawal, who are asking to care for our water resources and improve our water policy. Similarly, there are some people who are working around issues of right to information. So people like Aruna Roy, Anna Hazare, Arvind Kejriwal, Prashant Bhushan, they are citizens. They are without any position, they are without any office, but still they are more important than many ministers, many members of parliament. Then of course there are some authors, some journalists, Mahashweta Devi, U.R. Ananthamurthy, Kuldeep Nair. So the situation is changing. Younger generation is becoming more restive, and this makes us hope that if there is a dialogue between the system managers and the people of India in a more creative, not in blame game, but in a creative cooperation for a common cause of nation building, then I think we can catch up with the lost time.
Okay, that's fine. People are responding to different situation and they are coming forward, as you said that. But after some times, what happens? People, what was the ownership of the people? That ownership gets shifted to a few people, a group of the people, and then again the same people feel distant and defeated, and they go back to the home and don't respond to the problem of the situation. So what is the solution? But I will take your answer. But before that, we take a question from the person who is from Bihar. Okay, good afternoon. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Ji.
First, I would like to congratulate you for this effort of yours.
Okay.
It's really good for us, especially PH students like us.
Okay, thank
and
you.
I would like to raise a question that the new states which are being formed on regional identity, aren't they hampering our democracy at central level by promoting coalition government the wrong way. As the center is getting more deficit, they are more prone to other parties' system and their minority group.
Okay.
See, as long as the government is following rule of law, promoting development, and respecting the rights and the duties of the citizens, whether it is a one-party government or a multi-party government doesn't matter. In a society like India, where large parties are unable to accommodate and articulate regional issues of smaller communities and groups, it is natural that there will be regional parties. That is the dividend of democracy. Instead of fighting in the street, they create a platform, an agenda, go into election, get some seats, and constitutionally create a space of negotiation and justice. So regional parties, smaller parties are as important instruments for creating a democratic system as the larger parties, because both have different roles. And if you have a multi-level of unity, multi-level of development, obviously you will need both large parties and small parties. The problem is that the smaller parties sometimes become too parochial, and that creates instability in regional government or national government. They have to learn the art of balancing between national and the regional and the local. I hope that with people like you criticizing and experiencing concern, both national parties will become more attentive to the regional issues and aspirations, and regional parties will become more respectful, more caring for not only regional but national challenges and needs.
Now answer to my question.
Ji.
Ownership or the response shifting to the few.
Yeah, see,
but the fact it should have been gone to the sum to all. Why this kind of thinking?
This is because of the changing capacity of our political class. Political class is the translator of the aspirations, voices of ordinary people. And they are there not in hundreds, not in thousands, they are in millions. From panchayat to parliament, we have 3 levels of elected representatives. The only problem is that once they get elected, they become too concerned about vote bank politics, sectarian politics. They don't feel responsibility for all. And this is something which can be corrected by changing the style of leadership. A leader is one who represents all sections of society, including those who have not voted for you. And this deficient leadership, disconnected leadership, is now being interrogated in all parties, in all regions. And that's why in every election, 50% of the previously elected people are refused to be given a new term to serve because they have failed as leaders. But this is a great transition time, and hopefully with increasing unrest about development deficit.
We have another call from UP. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
जी
Okay, sir,
सवाल पूछिए.
I want to know,
या
sir,
सवाल पूछिए.
after opening our economy to laissez-faire doctrine since 1991, sir, how type problems emerge to lower level society?
Okay.
Well, you know that this
Sir,
was...
new problem emerge
बहुत अच्छा इनका सवाल है.
low level society.
जी आपका सवाल हम लोग समझ गए. बहुत अच्छा सवाल इनका कि ऊपर लेवल पर तो हम लोग एनालाइज करते हैं ग्लोबलाइजेशन लिबरलाइजेशन का, लोअर लेवल पर सोसाइटी पर कैसे इसने परिवर्तन लाया और क्या किया उसके बारे में बात नहीं.
देखिए, ये जो नया हमने रास्ता अपनाया था वो पूंजी का संकट और उत्पादन का संकट दूर करने के लिए अपनाया था. पिछले दिनों में इससे पूंजी तो आई, टेक्नोलॉजी भी नहीं आई. जो हमारे आसपास आप देखते हैं, मोबाइल फोन से लेकर के केबल टीवी तक, ये नई आर्थिक नीतियों में निहित खुलेपन का परिणाम था. जो हमारे बाजार में आप देश विदेश की वस्तुओं को देखते हैं, कलम और जूते से लेकर के कार और दवा के इलाज के यंत्रों तक में इसका फर्क दिखाई पड़ रहा है। लेकिन इसका लाभ उन्हीं इलाकों को मिला है जहां हमारी आधार संरचना यानी बिजली, सड़क, पानी और सुशिक्षित श्रम शक्ति रही है। इससे बंगलोर में, गुड़गांव में, नोएडा में, हैदराबाद में काफ़ी फर्क आया है। नवी मुंबई और दिल्ली का भी विस्तार हुआ है। लेकिन जो व्यापक भारत है, 3/4 भारत जो गांवों और छोटे कस्बों और छोटे शहरों का है, उनके लिए इन नीतियों में से एक अप्रत्यक्ष लाभ भले हुआ हो कि आपके बच्चे कस्बे से निकल करके दुनिया के श्रम बाजार में कंप्यूटर की पढ़ाई करने के बाद चले गए नौकरी करने के लिए। आपके इलाके में विश्व की बनी वस्तुएं कोका कोला से लेकर के हैमबर्गर तक पहुंच गया, पिज्ज़ा पहुंच गया। लेकिन रोजगार निर्माण की दृष्टि से और संपन्नता में साझेदारी की दृष्टि से यह असमानता मूलक उपाय रहा है। और अब जब विश्व की व्यवस्था में मंदी आई है तो हम भी जाने अनजाने फिसलन पर, ढलान पर आ गए हैं। किसानों के लिए, दोनों ही तरह के किसान, जिन्होंने इसमें हिस्सा लिया उनके लिए भी, और जो इससे बाहर रहे, उत्तर प्रदेश, बिहार, उड़ीसा, बंगाल के किसान, उनके लिए यह व्यवस्था अंतिम रूप पर लाभदायक नहीं साबित हुई। छोटे कारीगरों के लिए, छोटे उद्योगों के लिए, साड़ी और लुंगी और धोती बिनने वालों से लेके ताला और गिलास और प्लास्टिक के बर्तन बनाने वालों तक के लिए विश्व बाजार से पैदा चीज़ें, खासतौर पर चीन से आयातित चीज़ें, उनके लिए नुकसान का कारण रही हैं। दूसरी तरफ बीमा में, स्वास्थ्य सेवाओं में, शिक्षा में, मनोरंजन में, मीडिया में जिन्होंने पूंजी लगाई या जिनको उसकी ज़रूरत थी, वहाँ 10 से 12% ग्रोथ रेट रही है। बीपीओ सेंटर में 12 तक की पढ़ाई करने के बाद अगर आपको अच्छी अंग्रेजी आती है तो 20,000 से 30,000 रुपये तक की नौकरियां मिलने लगी हैं। तो ये असमान परिणाम है। कुछ इससे लाभान्वित हुए हैं, कई इससे लाभान्वित नहीं हो पाए।
जैसा कि आपने कहा कि कुछ क्षेत्र में तो अच्छा इसका परिणाम रहा, लेकिन कुछ क्षेत्र में नहीं रहा। लेकिन जब हम देखते हैं कि शुरुआती दौर में खास करके जब इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट भारत में लाया जा रहा था, तो उस समय ध्यान रखा गया कि नहीं, अगर यहाँ इंडस्ट्री लगाया जा रहा है तो इससे इतने लोगों का लाभ होगा, पूंजी यहाँ का है तो मजदूर वहाँ के आए। इस तरह से एक व्यवस्था बनाई गई ताकि इवन सबको लाभ मिले, पूरे देश भर को लाभ मिले। क्या जब इस अर्थव्यवस्था को हम खोल रहे थे तो उस समय जानबूझकर या अनजाने में छूट गया और एक रीजन को ही उसका लाभ मिला?
अब तो ये इसका मूल्यांकन हमारे अर्थशास्त्री, इतिहासकार, राजनीति शास्त्री, समाजशास्त्री कर ही रहे हैं। खुद इस नीति को चलाने वाली योजना आयोग ने भी स्वीकार किया है कि कहीं कुछ बड़ी असावधानियां हुई हैं और गरीबी के मूल्यांकन को लेकर के जो बहस चली है उसके जरिए हमने देखा है। नक्सलवाद को देख करके जो हमारी चिंताएं बढ़ी हैं उससे भी हमको साबित हुआ है कि जो आदिवासी इलाके थे उनके पास जो जल जंगल जमीन का मामला था, खनिज का भंडार था, उनके साथ एक तरफा रिश्ता हुआ। 20 बरस के नई आर्थिक नीति के जरिए हुए परिवर्तनों के परिणाम स्वरूप भारत के किसी भी आदिवासी इलाके में सर्वांगीण विकास का सपना पूरा नहीं हुआ। तो आदिवासी तो शायद कहीं पीछे छूट गए और इससे वो नाराज भी हैं। उनको आज मनाने की नई ज़रूरत है। इसलिए हमने कुछ कानून बनाए हैं जिसको हम कहते हैं फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट और पेसा। लेकिन जो मझोला भारत है यानी मध्यम वर्गीय भारत, उसके विस्तार का भी अवसर आया है और ये विस्तार शिक्षा के जरिए और नए रोजगार क्षेत्रों के विकास के जरिए हुआ है। विदेशों में रोजगार के अवसर जो मिले हैं उसके जरिए भी हुआ है। लेकिन फिर भी हम कह सकते हैं कि वो सभी इलाके जहाँ पर बिजली, सड़क, राजनीतिक स्थिरता का अभाव था, वो इलाके इनकी योजनाओं में छूट गए। आखिरी बात यह है कि इसमें हमने कुछ स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन्स बनाए थे, विशेष आर्थिक क्षेत्र। जहाँ जहाँ राज्यों में स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन बने, आंध्र में, कर्नाटक में, बाद में बंगाल में, तमिलनाडु में, महाराष्ट्र में, वहाँ पर जैसे कि प्रगति का एक टापू बन गया, लेकिन उसका अगल बगल के आसपास के इलाकों पर ज़्यादा असर नहीं हुआ। इसीलिए हमको सिंगूर और नंदीग्राम जैसी घटनाओं का सामना करना पड़ा, और कई इलाकों में तो किसानों ने स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन बनाने के लिए जमीन देने का भी विरोध किया।
How do you say this is a failure of governance, or this is a failure of from society, academician who did not respond to the success being written?
I think this is problem of the model, because we thought that by getting integrated with the global economy through market, we will be able to have some kind of efficiency based system of relationship. But we realized that we were getting globalized, and countries like America and China were becoming more and more nationalistic. They were giving subsidies to their farmers, and we were withdrawing subsidies from our farmers. They were not allowing intellectual property rights to be evenly honored and respected. There was not much of partnership in technology sharing. And of course, there was a very disbalanced relationship between import and export. Look at our relationship with China. What they are importing from us and what we are importing from them is very unfortunate experience. We have realized that economic nationalism is still very active in the era of globalization, and we should care for our primary economic interests first, then only as a second step go for globalization.
Okay. So the problem of model, it is not a problem.
Exactly. It's not governance so much, is not honesty and dishonesty so much as the model itself.
Okay. So now we come to the legitimacy deficiency which you were talking about. For legitimacy deficiency, who is responsible? Because after all, if you don't legitimate the power,
the legitimacy deficiency is totally a consequence of lack of respect for the rules of the game among the political class.
How can this game change?
They have ignored the requirements of fair play in their search for power. So power at any cost, winning election at any cost, has destroyed the level of purity which is needed for efficient representation. And it was the same system till 1989-90. We were not having so much of legitimacy deficit, because we knew that the elections are being conducted by and large without much abuse of money power, much abuse of electoral machinery. But after that, we have become very aware that the cost of election has gone up. People with good social basis but less economic resources have no chance of not only winning but even getting tickets from their own parties. The parties have started selling tickets for assembly and parliament. If election is dependent upon money power, then parliament becomes Crorepati Club. And if the country is such where 77% people have less than 20 rupees per day purchasing power, and parliament has 70% people whose assets are above few crores, there is definitely a disconnect and a mismatch. So this legitimacy deficit has to be restored by changing the electoral system, improving the election laws and the political party system.
Okay. So मित्रों, इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ आज के व्याख्यान को यहीं विराम देते हैं। कल फिर हम लोग चर्चा करेंगे कंटेम्पोररी सोसाइटी चैलेंजेस, प्रॉब्लम एंड प्रोस्पेक्ट पर। आप सबको धन्यवाद, और आपकी ओर से डॉक्टर आनंद कुमार को भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
बहुत धन्यवाद।